And here we are. Today is number 4 of the 20-day flower creation journey. Today we are going to paint together a Freesia, which is a flower I found on the Flower Color guidebook. As you can see, the flower is bright yellow and it's in round shape, quite small, and it's attached on this thick stem. Let's start painting it. So I'm gonna use a filbert brush from Da Vinci in size 10 because I feel this gives me the perfect shape already to create loose style petals typical of this flower. I'm going to press on the paper my brush and drag it to the center. And I'm going to repeat the same movement for all the petals of this Freesia. I press onto the paper the brush from the belly or from the side and I drag it to the center. I take care that all the petals are going to be pointing to the same center. And then I add a little bit of yellow ochre and yellow lemon dip to the center to give a little bit of more contrast in the center. I keep refining the shape and the amount of petals I want to create by adding more petals to each and every bud. The strokes I'm creating are short and quick. I keep removing part of the pigment in my cup of water in order to create different color values. And then I mix some yellow lemon dip and yellow ochre to create different types of yellow. Using the side of my brush, I create very fine brush strokes, and these will be some very fine and little petals. When I use the belly of my brush, I create instead some thicker brush strokes and therefore thicker petals. I add some more concentrated yellow ochre to give dimension to the center of these petals. I usually like the center of my flowers to be a little bit darker, so this is something that I do pretty often and I recommend you to do as well if you want to have more dimension with your painting. I mix a little bit of yellow lemon dip and I start to create another bud of this flower. I'm not actually following precisely the picture that I have on my left, but I'm using it as a reference and I've decided to add a little bit more details and more flowers compared to the reference picture. I find that using a filbert brush is very simple and quite useful to create round-shaped flowers because of the shape of the brush in itself. Being the brush already round, it is really simple to create these petals of this Freesia. Therefore, this tutorial is a perfect exercise to improve and to practice your strokes with a filbert brush. In this moment, I'm adding some contrasting brush strokes into the center of these flowers, and I really like it because I see how the flowers start to pop up. I keep removing some pigments from my brush and I keep adding a few buds of these flowers all over the page. Honestly, this is one of the flower compositions that I enjoy the most. And therefore, at this point, I really added flowers where I felt very comfortable because I was having fun and I just kept going, and honestly, I was not looking at the reference picture. I recommend you when you use a filbert brush, but in reality this tip is valid for any brush, to change the movement of your wrist to find ways to create different shapes of different petals. Remember to drag all of your brush strokes to the center, because all of the petals of any flowers indeed are attached to the same central part. So this is what you should be able to achieve as well. Doesn't matter if these are loose style flowers or very detailed flowers, all the petals need to lead to the same center. I keep adding at this point some more concentrated brush strokes of yellow ochre and yellow lemon deep, and I allow the paint to bleed with what I've just painted on the paper through the wet on wet technique. I use the side of the filbert brush to create fine lines, and this helps me also to touch very slightly the paper and allow the colors to blend. At this point, I rinse off my filbert brush and I started to use instead the mop brush to create the thick stem that is holding these beautiful yellow flowers, and to create also these sort of green buds that are hanging from some of these stems. I use the tip of my brush to create a fine line, and I will use more pressure to create something thicker afterwards. Usually when I start to create the first stems, every time I do not add too much pressure. I want to have an overall look at what I'm doing, and then when I am happy with the result, I add more details, and usually I enlarge the stem if it's needed. If your Freesia flowers are still wet, you can touch with the tip of your brush the bottom part of the flower, and you will have some bleeding moments happening at the bottom of the flower. If you don't like to have some green blending into the yellow of the flower, you just don't touch the bottom part of the flower, or you just wait for the flower to be completely dry. I personally love how the green blends into the yellow, so I don't mind if some blending moments are happening and if the yellow is becoming darker. But this is your choice, your painting, so just paint in the way you feel more comfortable and do what you like the most. I keep adding a few details, and I keep adding the stem where some of the flowers don't have it yet. And I keep refining the main stem of the central flowers that is thin. I like how the whole composition is becoming, so I just add a few more details. At this point, I decided to add some green buds, and I created the stem with the point of my brush, and I created the buds by touching with the tip and dragging down the brush to create these small buds. At this point, I'm not really following the picture, the reference picture, as I said, because I'm enjoying the process so much, and I just decided to add a few more flowers. So also for the buds, I'm just looking where there is a weird space that I want to be filled. You can easily add these green buds also with a round brush, and you can also do the whole composition with a round brush if you feel like. We are approaching the end of this composition, and therefore, as you know, I love to add some darker and contrasting brush strokes all over the page. In this case, I created a darker green by mixing a little bit of tallow turquoise to the sap green, and I'm adding a few very thin strokes onto the stem and also onto the buds that I've created in first place. When I'm satisfied with the overall outcome of the green and the contrasting colors of the green, I do the same into the center part of these flowers. I use a little bit of yellow ochre mixed with a little bit of yellow lemon deep, and with the tip of my brush I create very fine lines where the petals are. In this case I wanted to add some darker brush strokes, so I take a darker yellow and I keep touching the petals I've created. The petals in this case are already dry, therefore adding these fine lines will not blend into what I've already created, and these lines will stay as they are. I have the feeling these lines will give a little bit of more details to the whole composition, and I have to say this is something that I really like to do very much. I'm adding some yellow buds into the green ones that I have already created, because I noticed from the reference picture that these buds have some little flowers that are peeking out. And now we are approaching the end of this tutorial. I hope you had fun and you improved your brush strokes. Keep practicing with the filbert brush. It's everything for now. I hope to see you on day 5.